Welcome back to Artificial Evidence, where the smallest details lead to the biggest revelations. I am your host, Owen Carver, and today we are heading to a small town in the heart of Michigan's Upper Peninsula. A town called Ironwood, surrounded by dense forests, old mining shafts, and miles of forgotten logging trails. It was here, in the summer of 2009, that three men set off on a weekend camping trip. Experienced outdoorsmen, familiar with the unpredictable terrain and the harsh isolation of the North Woods. Only two of them made it back. The official report ruled the case an accident, an unfortunate fall in the darkness. But something about the details never sat right. What should have been a straightforward explanation unraveled into a web of contradictions, unanswered questions, and a disturbing discovery nearly a decade later. What happened in those woods? And why, after all these years, does the story still not add up? This is the Ironwood Incident. On the morning of July 17, 2009, 34-year-old Jason Brooks left his home in Madison, Wisconsin, heading north toward Michigan's Upper Peninsula. With him were two close friends, Brian Cole and Eric Matheson, both in their mid-30s. They had known each other for years, first as co-workers, then as regulars in the same hunting and fishing circles. Their plan was simple. 3 days of camping, hiking, and fishing near Lake Gojibik, a remote stretch of wilderness not far from the Porcupine Mountains. They arrived that afternoon, set up camp near a clearing off an old fire road, and spent the evening cooking over the fire, drinking a few beers and sharing stories. By all accounts, it was a normal night, until it was not. At 6:45 the next morning, a panicked 911 call came through to the Gojibik County Sheriff's Office. The caller was Brian Cole. His words were nearly incoherent. There had been an accident. Jason was missing. The dispatcher tried to get details, but Brian's voice was erratic, bordering on hysterical. He and Eric had spent the last 2 hours searching. They could not find Jason anywhere. Deputies arrived at the campsite by 8 o'clock, where they found Brian and Eric visibly shaken, their clothes dirty, their hands scratched from pushing through the underbrush. They told officers that Jason had gotten up in the middle of the night, likely to relieve himself. When they woke up around 5, his sleeping bag was empty. At first, they thought he had gone for a walk, maybe to watch the sunrise over the lake. But as time passed, the realization set in. Jason was gone. Search and rescue teams were called in. By noon, more than 20 volunteers, along with officers from the Sheriff's Department and the Department of Natural Resources, were scouring the area. The initial search focused on the immediate vicinity of the campsite, but as the hours stretched on with no sign of Jason, the perimeter widened. By the end of the day, nothing had been found. No footprints, no torn fabric, no signs of a struggle. Just the woods, stretching in every direction, untouched and indifferent. The next morning, the search resumed, this time with K9 units. The dogs picked up Jason's scent near the campsite, but lost it less than 100 yards away. It was as if he had simply vanished. It was the third day when they found him. About half a mile from camp, at the base of a rocky outcrop known locally as Miner's Bluff, Jason Brooks was dead. His body lay sprawled on a bed of moss and pine needles, his arms at unnatural angles, his skull fractured from what appeared to be a devastating fall. The conclusion seemed obvious. Jason had wandered away from camp in the dark, become disoriented, and fallen from the bluff. The Sheriff's Department ruled the death accidental. His family was devastated, but there was no reason to believe foul play had been involved, at least, not yet. In 2015, 6 years after Jason's death, an amateur hiker made a discovery in the same area. Stuffed into the hollow of a tree, hidden beneath layers of rotting leaves and broken branches, was a small black backpack. Inside, he found a flashlight, a first aid kit, a knife, and a wallet. The wallet belonged to Jason Brooks. The location, nearly a mile from where Jason's body had been found, raised immediate questions. If Jason had fallen in the night, why was his backpack so far from his remains? More troubling, why had it never been found during the original search? Investigators revisited the case, this time taking a closer look at the autopsy report. Something stood out. Though Jason's injuries were consistent with a fall, there were additional fractures on his ribs that suggested an impact from more than one direction. The medical examiner had originally dismissed them as post-mortem damage from scavengers. But there was another possibility, an altercation, a struggle, an impact before the fall. When investigators questioned Brian and Eric again, their accounts had subtle inconsistencies. They insisted Jason had been drinking that night, though blood tests from the original autopsy showed only a small amount of alcohol in his system. They claimed they had gone to sleep around midnight, but another camper, about a quarter-mile away, recalled hearing raised voices in the woods sometime after 1 a.m. A forensic analyst reviewed the photos from the original scene and noticed something else. Jason's shoes were missing. Not at the base of the cliff, not in the surrounding area, nowhere. And yet, when his backpack was discovered 6 years later, they were inside it, meaning that at some point before Jason fell to his death, he had removed his shoes and packed them away, or someone else had. The re-examination of the case never led to formal charges. By the time new evidence surfaced, too many years had passed. But investigators no longer believe Jason Brooks's death was a simple accident. Something happened that night, something that neither Brian nor Eric have ever fully explained. And as of today, the official record still lists his cause of death as accidental. But the truth, whatever it may be, remains buried in the Michigan woods. Thank you for listening to Artificial Evidence. If you have thoughts or theories, let us know on social media. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review. And remember, the algorithm knows.